All right, we are now live.
This conference will now be recorded.
This meeting is now called to order. I'd like to welcome everyone this evening. For roll call, everyone is present this evening. We'll now take a moment of reflection and respect, please. Thank you. Confirmation of the agenda.
That Council adopts the agenda for the meeting of March 15th, 2021 as amended by adding the following item: correspondence from Andrew Henry, Director of Regional Water at the Elgin Area Water Supply System, regarding appointment of board members to the Board of Management. And this item is being proposed as added as item 8.11 at the end of action items.
Okay, someone to move and someone to second. Councillor Barber and Councillor Chapman. Are there any questions or concerns? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? Seeing none. There are no delegations and public meetings this evening. So minutes to approve.
That Council approves the following minutes. Regular virtual meeting of Council held on March 1st, 2021.
Someone to move and someone to second. Councillor Charlton and Councillor Chapman. Are there any questions or concerns? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that's carried. The next item up is consent agenda.
That items 7.1 to 7.6 of the March 15th, 2021 consent agenda be adopted as presented, with actions to be taken as noted.
Okay, someone to move and someone to second. Councillor Ham and Deputy Mayor Andrews. Are there any questions or concerns with the consent agenda? Councillor Charlton.
Through your worship, number 7.1, could someone remind me just what this software is used for? I know we have lots of software programs, and I'm just not sure what this one is particularly used for.
Is there a member of our staff that would like to answer Councillor Charlton's question? Andy, would you like to?
Sure, perhaps I could start off, and if I mess up in any way, I think Kale might be able to jump in too. Just to highlight for council, this is our GIS mapping system. So essentially, it's important for any land planning that goes on in the county, not just for us, but for the county as well. So it really is kind of our plotting of all the properties that we own and our tracking of all the information on those properties. So I don't know if Cale, you have anything to add to that?
No, nothing particular, through you, Your Worship. Just to be clear, this is the Esri license only for the county program. We already own one of these licenses through our partnership with the Township of Malahide.
Councillor Charlton?
So through your worship, so is it something that any of the staff uses on a daily or weekly basis to keep track of anything, or not?
Through you, Your Worship, I've built a number of additional layers in this mapping through our Malahide program in the last 4 years. We've added zoning, our official plan layer, zone changes. I use it pretty much every day, but I might be the only one that does that. On the operations side, they do track water mains and lines, as well as some sewer mains, and force main data is also on the mapping. Now, I'm not sure any of that information will be ported onto the Elgin County system, but it certainly is in the GIS system at Malahide that we use.
I think it. Thank you.
Councillor Oslach?
Yes, Your Worship. I'm glad the province came through with the COVID relief funding for municipalities, and I believe we got a sizable grant. I think from the province, and that's going to help out a lot.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Oslach. Are there any other questions? Councillor Charlton?
Through your worship, further to 7.4 and 7.5, this stuff is often just received and filed. Are there any letters of support ever sent with regards to some of these issues? I'm thinking 7.4, they talk about, what's the word I want here? Yeah, Joint Economic Development Corporation with the City of St. Thomas.
Well, I can try to answer that for you, Councillor Charlton. It's pertaining to the service delivery review that the County of Elgin just recently did. And so the county has interviewed staff members from each municipality, as well as I've had the opportunity to speak to this with Strategy Corp, the group, the consultants that are doing this. So I'm not sure if one of our staff members want to speak to this, but I know that we've all had input into this. And I can also assure you that we're going to be doing a meeting with St. Thomas and the Economic Development Corporation, as well as the St. Thomas councillors shortly to discuss this further. And this will be through the County of Elgin. Does that answer your question, Councillor Charlton, or do you need more information?
No, that's pretty much it. I just didn't want rural Elgin County to lose its identity by working really closely with economic development in St. Thomas, that's all. So, all right, thank you.
You're welcome. Are there any other questions or concerns with the consent agenda? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. Now we'll move into the action items. So the first report up is Fire 0221.
That report Fire 0221 entitled 2020 Annual Fire Department Report be received for information.
Okay, someone to move and someone to second. Councillor Oslach and Councillor Barber. Is the chief here this evening?
Through your worship, he's not present this evening.
Okay, thank you. Maybe Andy, did you want to speak to this report just a bit, give a bit more information, or I don't know, maybe there'll be questions from council about this report?
Sure, yeah, I can speak to it briefly. So this is just the annual report. We saw fire losses increase, and we saw also the amounts of fire saved increase. So I think it shows how the fire department's really focusing on what they need to do, and obviously taking in their recent service delivery review. Obviously a challenging year with COVID-19 for all our areas, including the fire service. And certainly I'd like to thank Chief Taylor for staying on and delaying his retirement for another month and till the end of this month. It's been really helpful to me as a new CAO to still have him here for a while.
Okay, thank you, Andy. Are there any questions or concerns with the report? Councillor Barber? You're on mute, Councillor Barber.
Sorry, Your Worship. My mouse didn't work properly. Anyway, I'd like to thank the firefighters themselves for again making a donation, $8,500 toward purchasing of equipment that wouldn't necessarily be available through their normal budget process. It's a long history that the firefighters have done so, and it just means a lot to the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Barber. Are there any other comments? I would like to take this opportunity on behalf of council. I know that the chief isn't with us this evening, but I would really like to take this opportunity to thank him for his hard work, his dedication, and as Andy has mentioned, staying on and helping us for a bit longer. And we wish Sam nothing but the best, and we hope he really enjoys his retirement. So if there are no further questions or comments, all those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. The next report is CAO 0121.
That report CAO 0121 entitled Dog Shelter Agreement be received for information, and that council authorized the clerk to enter into a one-year renewal of the existing dog shelter agreement with the City of St. Thomas. And further, that council approve an exemption to section 4.4 of the purchasing policy and bylaw 3419 as amended to permit the renewal of the dog shelter agreement with the City of St. Thomas.
Okay, someone to move and someone to second. Deputy Mayor Andrews and Councillor Ham. This is a pretty self-explanatory report, but did you have any further comments, Andy?
Thank you, Mayor. No, just to the principle that we're kind of looking at all our services to see where efficiencies can be found, and we'll be bringing them forward to council for consideration of next year's budget.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Oslach.
What about cat shelters?
I don't know, Councillor Oslach.
I have dealt with municipalities that had cat shelters before, and it always leads to the unenviable report every year about how many cats had to be euthanized. So that sometimes it's, we can do whatever council wants. There's just a dollar figure attached.
Well, this is an ongoing problem with me, and your worship knows about this. I worked on this for about 10 years, and also I brought it to council, the previous council or one of the councils about cat shelters and feral cats and everything. And basically I get laughed at all the time. So I'm going to drop this subject, your worship.
Thanks, Councillor Oslach. Are there any further questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. The next item up is report CAO 0221.
That report CAO 0221 entitled Amendment Procurement Policy be received for information, and that council considers giving first and second readings to bylaw 2221 to amend bylaw 3419, which is the procurement policy.
Okay, someone to move and someone to second. Councillor Ham and Councillor Charlton. Andy, is there anything further you'd like to add to the report?
Through you, Mayor, this is a lot of minor improvements to the procurement policy, so it's not a large overhaul. It's just tweaking some minor areas.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions or concerns? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. The next item up is CAO 0321.
That report CAO 0321 entitled Council Remuneration Update be received for information, and that Council approve the staff recommendation to consider a one-time adjustment to Council remuneration outside of pay policy 2.18 in the interest of moving to a total compensation methodology for Council remuneration starting in 2024, and further that Council consider giving first and second reading to bylaw 1921 to establish remuneration for the mayor, deputy mayor, and councillors of the town of Elmer.
Okay, someone to move and someone to second. Deputy Mayor Andrews and Councillor Charlton. Is there anything you'd like to add to this report, Andy?
Thank you, Mayor. No, it's just a report to try to find some parity and fairness in compensation.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. The next report up is CAO 0421.
That report CAO 0421 entitled Amendment Reserve Fund Policy Bylaw 6219 Investment Policy be received for information, and that Council consider giving first and second reading to the amending bylaw 2021 to bylaw 6219 relating to the reserve fund, and that Council consider giving first and second reading to bylaw 2121 to establish a Council Initiatives Reserve Fund.
Okay, someone to move and someone to second. Councillor Ham and Councillor Oslach. Andy, did you want to elaborate a bit more on this report?
Thank you, Mayor. So this report essentially seeks to take the ERS dividends that we don't get every year, but in the years that we do get them, to put them into a special reserve fund, which would be called the Council Initiatives Reserve Fund. And that's just to hold them separate so that you always know where these funds are, and we're not necessarily tying them to anything like asset management as currently is occurring.
Okay, thank you, Andy. Are there any questions, comments about this report? Seeing none, all those in, I'm sorry, Councillor Chapman. Go ahead.
Oh, I just want to be clear on this. So we're getting these dividends now, and they go into asset management, which means they can only be used for that. So we're going to put them in a separate reserve so that they can be used for whatever's necessary.
Yes, so this would be a separate reserve that council may desire to access for special council initiatives from time to time, where you're not, it is a reserve fund still, so you'd still be borrowing from a reserve, but it's specifically established to kind of have a broader spectrum than what your asset management reserve would have.
And how will this affect our asset management reserve?
Yeah, so the asset management plan, as is laid out, requires that we put at least 5% of the replacement costs into it every year. So there is still levies for the asset management, and that still will occur. And as we move towards the more robust reporting, we'll have to do a more thorough analysis of it, but it shouldn't damage us because these are considered right now as unanticipated revenues every year. So you aren't anticipating them; they aren't being actually set aside for capital projects that don't occur in a given year. So they're almost like, I hate to say extra money, is there's never extra money in municipal government, but it's almost like that's how it's coming to us, this dividend from an investment.
Okay.
Councillor Barber, did you have a question?
Yes, I do, to Andy, if I may, Your Worship. Would these funds be a source of additional revenue from investment purposes? Can they be moved into an investment folder?
Through you, Mayor French, one of the challenges that all municipalities have is that investments that we can participate in are relatively low yield. So if you look at the Invest One that we do, it's a good kind of investment for municipalities, but with the volatility in the market, we haven't gotten exceptional returns from the bond investments, right? Year over year, even though we have $1.6 million in there, we're getting relatively low returns on that. So we could look at it, but to get a slightly higher return on investment than we would just having it in a specific bank account. And we'll discuss that and we'll look into that when we prepare the investment report for this year for council's consideration.
Thank you.
Are there any further questions or comments? Councillor Oslach?
Yes, Your Worship. We had a street light initiative several years ago, and we borrowed a lot of money to do our street lights. I think 700 of them, and we still owe, I think, a number of years on that project. And could we use that money from Earth Corp to pay down that debt? This is a question, Andy.
Through you, Mayor French, I'm not specifically aware of that project, so I'd have to look into it, but we could use this fund to pay off that we have, pending that there isn't any penalties included in the agreement that we have. So we'd have to review that in specific to make that determination. But generally, one of the things that I want to bring forward to council is kind of a debt level policy. So you can determine how much debt you're comfortable with taking on. Somewhere between 10 and 15% is what I would suggest. And then when council considers that and approves it, then anything within that would kind of be all right to do. So I know in principle, it's always good to not have debt, but the interest rates right now are so very low that it's not necessarily the worst problem to have debt.
Further to that, I think it was about 5 or 6 years ago that we initiated that development for streetlights, and I think we borrowed, I think, $700,000 or $800,000 to do that, and I believe that the streetlight initiative, this electricity that we save, would offset that at that time. Now I don't know if that's still going on, but this reserve fund, special reserve fund that we're putting this Earth Corp money into could actually go to pay that debt down, I think,
Yeah, that is a good idea. I'll look into that too, because I do know there was an LAS program a number of years ago to create energy efficiencies through street lighting. So there might be specific, if that was the one we're involved in, there might be specific contractual obligations, but we'll look into it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Are there any further questions or comments? I think with this report, as Andy has said, our staff will look into this a little bit further and make sure, exactly where we stand with what Councillor Oslach has asked, and as well as the other councillors. And if there's any further information, I'm sure Andy will bring it to us, if that's okay with everyone. Okay, if there aren't any further questions or comments, all those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. The next item up is Corp 1521.
That report, Corp 1521, entitled Cottonwood Hills Subdivision Draft Plan Extension, be received for information, and further that council directs staff to notify the County of Elgin that council for the town of Elmer is in support of a 3-year extension of the draft plan approval for Cottonwood Hills Subdivision on to May 15th, 2024.
Okay, someone to move and someone to second. Councillor Barber and Deputy Mayor Andrews. Cale, did you want to give us any further information about this report?
Through you, Your Worship, I think it's pretty self-explanatory. The folks at Sifton are now preparing the site, as we discussed in December, And this is just to further allow the development of the additional future phases as discussed in the report.
Okay, thank you, Cale. Question, Councillor Charlton.
So through your worship, does this mean they're not going to be putting infrastructure in this coming year and road work and starting to dig foundations or anything like that?
Through you, your worship, as discussed at the last meeting, they have to have ministry approval to put pipes in the ground. So that approval is what is causing any delay to their design and construction. So I can't speak for whether they will put foundations in this year because the ministry is the one who approves those detailed engineering designs. So I guess Sifton's initiative is there. They're trying to get this underway. They need to finalize the drawings to submit for approval from the ministry. As soon as that approval comes, they can construct the roads with the pipes in them. So it's hard to say.
All right, thank you.
Any further questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that's carried. The next report up is Finance 0521.
That report, Finance 0521, entitled 2020 Council Remuneration and Expenses Report, be received for information.
Okay, someone to move and someone to second. Councillor Ham and Councillor Chapman. It's pretty self-explanatory, so I'm sure if you do have a question, make sure you put your hand up. I think you may have authored this report, Cale, and I'm pretty sure there's nothing to add to it. So questions, comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. The next report is Operations 0421.
That report, Operations 0421, entitled Contract Award Clarence Street Reconstruction Project, be received for information, and that Council awards the Clarence Street Reconstruction contract to Elgin Construction Company Limited of St. Thomas, Ontario, and further that the Mayor and Clerk be authorized to execute the agreement with Elgin Construction Company Limited following the terms and conditions in the tender documents.
Okay, someone to move and someone to second. Councillor Charlton and Deputy Mayor Andrews. Rob, did you want to give any further information about this report?
Maybe just a quick overview, Your Worship. Council will recall this. We were scheduled to tender this last year, right at the very start of the pandemic, and nobody at that time really knew the scope or breadth of this pandemic and how it would affect our operations. So we hit the pause button. We then retendered this project over the winter, and in an effort to sort of get this done this year, this was sort of given as a priority to staff to get finished. I know Council would like to see this project done. We issued the tender, and we got a number of bids. Unfortunately, a number of them had enough irregularities and significant irregularities that only one really is a sole bidder, if you will. Council has a couple of options when it comes to deciding whether to accept the tender or retender. You could delay the tender again and give sufficient time to go back out to the market to make sure that we were undertaking procurement in sort of a fair manner. We could rescope the project, or we could award the contract. And I've ran through those scenarios in the report, and you'll see that the staff recommendation is to sort of continue on and award the contract. I don't think the rescope is really in the best interest of the town, nor the delay. In my experience, there's been very few instances where I've reissued a tender and it's resulted in lower prices down the road. I think in my career, actually, I can remember probably like one that had happened, and we had timed the market so poorly the first time that it did result in lower bids. I don't expect this to be the case given the ongoing pandemic and the uncertainty out there. So for those reasons, and I did include in the report, I redacted the names of the companies that bid, but I wanted to include the tender prices so the council could have some feeling of where that sole bid kind of fell. It wasn't the discount rate, if you will, but it's certainly within a margin that I would feel is an acceptable price for the contract. You'll see in the engineer's letter as well, there's a number of items in there that we may or may not have to use during the course of the contract, and hopefully we don't have to use those and we can continue to keep this project on budget. Thank you, Your Worship.
Okay, thank you, Rob. Are there any questions or comments? Councillor Barber. You're on mute, Councillor Barber.
My apologies again, Council. To Rob, can you refresh our memories what the budgeted amount was?
I believe the budgeted amount was 1.5.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Charlton, I think you had your hand up, and then Councillor Chapman.
Yeah, through Your Worship. Yeah, this is a good news story. It's been a long time coming, but certainly better done this year than half done last year. And I know the residents of Clarence Street and people that drive Clarence Street are really going to appreciate this when it's all done. Thank you.
Councillor Chapman?
Through Your Worship. So do you have a start date intended?
Yeah, through Your Worship, we'd like to get started in early April. It'll depend, of course, on tonight's council's decision. And then I believe we have a early September completion date. Save and accept a few items. Sometimes there's an advantage for the contractor not to lay sod in August, let's say. We would allow them to sort of continue into better weather on some of the items, but we'd like to see the project done in September.
And
go ahead.
Also, through Your Worship, is the whole area to be done at once, or will it be done in sections, or just so that we anticipate what's going to happen to this connecting streets?
Through Your Worship, yeah, construction usually progresses block by block. And unfortunately, you don't do one block and move on to the next. For example, they might put a water main in, and while that's waiting to be pressure tested and chlorinated and back T samples set away, they'll move on to the next and then possibly move back to that first one to then do the services. They go through each block 4 times. The sanitary is the deepest, so you'll put that in. Then they'll go through, with the storm sewer, then the water main, and then reconnect everybody in once it's all the infrastructure's in place. So people do see equipment 4 times in front of their house. It's a bit of a process to get to the end, if that helps. Yes.
Can I continue?
Certainly.
So the construction's from John to west of Dufferin. So what is the detour route? Or you haven't got that figured out yet?
Through Your Worship, no, those are some of the details that we still will have to work through with the contractor.
Okay.
The goal will be to try and keep as many people having access to their homes as we can at all times.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, any further questions or comments? Councillor Chapman?
Just one. Thank you.
We'll thank everybody once we vote, Councillor Chapman. So on that happy note, if there aren't any more questions or comments, we'll vote. All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. And the next report up is Operations 0521.
That report, Operations 0521, entitled Aylmer Water Distribution System Annual Report, be received for information, and that Council receives and approves the Aylmer Distribution System Annual Report for the year 2020 as required by Ontario Regulation 170.03, Section 11, and that the town posts a copy of the report on the website and provide a copy for public viewing at the front counter of Town Hall, and further that staff forward a copy of the Aylmer Distribution System Annual Report 2020 to the Township of Malahide as required by regulation.
Okay, someone to move and someone to second. Councillor Charlton and Councillor Chapman. Rob, did you have any further information about this report?
I just want to commend council on their work to get that chlorine sampler in at the tower replaced in a really timely manner. As you know, there was some communications failures there that would result in an erroneous zero that staff would have to physically attend the site and do all of the reporting and confirm with the ministry that it was a communications failure. And I think by replacing that machine, we have saved ourselves a lot of staff time on that item that didn't have to take place. And we continue to provide, safe, clean drinking water to the residents of the town.
Thank you, Rob. Are there any questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. The next item up is Clerk 0721.
That report, Clerk 0721, entitled COVID-19 Operational Update, be received for information.
Someone to move and someone to second. Councillor Charlton and Councillor Ham. Josh, is there anything further that you'd like to discuss with this report?
Through your worship and two members of council, this report's on behalf of the Emergency Operation Control Group. We continue to meet regularly as more changes come through from the province relating to the orders for COVID-19. Most recently, on February 26th, the province announced that Southwestern Public Health would be placed in the orange restrict zone from the previously red zone. So this did have some operational impacts. Most notably, we've got that the East Elgin Community Complex is able to resume some of their ice rentals and other programming, including pickleball and shuffleboard. Additionally, Town Hall was reopened to the public on March 8th through the Talbot Street facing vestibule. And we had also noted that staff are slowly being reintroduced into the workplace with certain staff that are able to continuing to work remotely. And that's all, Your Worship.
Thank you, Josh. Are there any questions or comments? Deputy Mayor Andrews.
Thank you, through your worship. Just a comment more than anything. I've had a lot of comments about the ice being back in and how great it is to be able to resume the ice rental. How have the rentals been? Is there an update on that as far as pickleball and some of the other things outside of ice rental?
Through your worship and to Deputy Mayor Andrews, I can't speak specifically to the to the usership at the moment, but what I can share is that Tom Polland, the manager of Parks and Recreation, and his staff have been very diligent about continuing to communicate with user groups throughout the entire process. And I know as well that most recently they've been very helpful, I think, in assisting some of these user groups with coming up with the appropriate safety plans and working their best to ensure a smooth transition.
And that's been the comments that I've heard as well, that they've been excellent to work with. So just big thank you to the staff, and it's just nice to have a little bit of normalcy back in for everybody's lives. So thank you.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor Andrews. Are there any other questions or comments? Councillor Charlton?
Just wanted to comment that these pickleball players, they're a hardy bunch. They played pickleball in Lions Park over here till the snow was flying, and they were out just this last week, and it was a chilly morning, but yeah, they were playing pickleball by 10 o'clock. So a hardy bunch. I'm sure they appreciate it.
Okay, anything further? Any more questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. And next up, we have a resolution. It's in regard to the correspondence from Andrew Henry.
That the correspondence from Andrew Henry, Director of Regional Water, on behalf of the Elgin Area Water Supply System, be received for information, and further that Council gives direction to staff in relation to that correspondence.
Okay, someone to move and someone to second. Councillor Barber and Deputy Mayor Andrews. Andy, were you going to speak to this?
Thank you, Mayor. So in reviewing the request for appointments, staff didn't want this to fall by the wayside and have it be forgotten. We have currently Councillor Barber is a member. For ourselves, Bayham and Malahide, and Bayham has an alternative. So what we were suggesting was that council may want to recommend that Bayham's alternative become the member, and that Malahide appoint an alternative to both of the members on the board.
Okay, are there any questions or comments about this? Councillor Barber.
Just a clarification, Your Worship. We collectively appoint one member, and there will be two alternates. Each of the alternates has the ability to act in the absence of the member, but only one person, either the member or either of the two alternates, can vote. That has to be determined prior to the meetings. The alternates are encouraged to participate in the discussions, but again, only one person can vote. If the member is there, the member votes. If the member is not there, either one of the two alternates can vote.
Okay,
my apologies, I misunderstood that.
No problem.
So yeah, I'm assuming then we seek Malahide to appoint another alternate.
Yes.
Councillor Chapman.
I'm just a little bit confused. So you said Malahide and Bayham would have alternates, but Elmer would not?
Perhaps Councillor Barber could probably explain it better, but we're actually the appointee, and we represent all three municipalities. So currently Bayham has an alternate, but Malahide has no representation. So just allowing Malahide, showing our support as a council for Malahide to appoint the other alternative would mean that it was somewhat equitable.
Just a little bit more history, if I may, Your Worship. A couple of months ago, Dutton Dunwich came on as a member. They began to get their the water supply through the Elgin area water system. And when they came on board initially, they did not have an opportunity to have a voice. And their request caused a revision to the appointment bylaw, which brought an extra person on in the southern or the western area, and that just rippled through the whole system so that it would be equitable.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Barber. Councillor Chapman.
For your worship, so just so I'm clear, is it because Elmer, Malahide, and Bayham are considered one group?
Did you want to answer that?
Sure, I'd be happy to. Elmer, Malahide, and where we are, and Bayham all share a portion of the of the system. The water will flow either along Dexter Line or Highway 3, and it's dependent on how the municipality is receiving the water that allocates where their representation would lie. Central Elgin, which is the other member, is part of the southern group because the majority of their water flows along Dexter Line. In the upper end, Highway 3, Elmer receives about 97% of the water.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Barber. Does that help you, Councillor Chapman, to understand the resolution? Are you okay with it, or do you have further questions?
No, I think I've got it.
Okay. Are there any other concerns or questions about this? Does anyone want to hear the resolution reread, or are we okay with the way it's written? Okay. Do you want it reread, Councillor Chapman?
Yep.
Do you mind, Josh, please?
certainly through your worship, so that the correspondence from Andrew Henry, Director of Regional Water, on behalf of the Elgin Area Water Supply System be received for information, and that council directs staff to send correspondence to the municipality of Bayham and Township of Malahide regarding the prospect of the Township of Malahide appointing an additional alternate to the board as permitted by recent revisions to the Elgin Area Primary Water Supply System appointment bylaw.
Okay, any further questions? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. Next up is new business and matters of urgency. Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to reading of bylaws and proceedings thereon.
Right. That council gives first and second reading to bylaw 1921, being a bylaw to establish the remuneration for the mayor, deputy mayor, and members of town council effective January 1st, 2021. Bylaw 2021, being a bylaw to amend bylaw 6219, respecting the establishment of a reserve fund policy for the corporation of the town of Elmer. And bylaw 2121, being a bylaw to establish a council initiatives reserve fund.
Okay, someone to move and someone to second. Councillor Oslach and Councillor Charlton. Are there any further questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. The next item up is suspend policies and procedures.
That council suspends the procedural policies to proceed with three readings of bylaw 2221, being a bylaw to amend bylaw 3419 as amended respecting the corporation of the town of Elmer's policies and procedures for the procurement of goods and services.
Okay, someone to move and someone to second. Deputy Mayor Andrews and Councillor Chapman. Any questions, comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that's carried. The next item up is third reading.
That council gives three readings to bylaw 2221, being a bylaw to amend bylaw 3419 as amended, respecting the corporation of the town of Elmer's policies and procedures for the procurement of goods and services.
Okay, someone to move and someone to second. Councillor Ham and Councillor Chapman. Are there any questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. Next item up is inquiries by members. Councillor Chapman.
There's a grant available for improving outside activities, and I just wondered if we've looked at that and made some considerations towards it, and just what ideas we can draw from for and if we're applying for this grant.
Yes, I know staff have been looking at it. Andy, do you want to answer that question, please?
Sure, of course. So we did take a lot of initial looks at that grant opportunity, and unfortunately the first window of it closed on March 15th. So already today it closed. There is another opening in May, which we're preparing for. And so I've worked with Tom on some trail rehab that we're proposing and lighting in parks. So that'll be one component of it. The other component of the funding opportunity is that it also supports digital opportunities. So we're looking at digital opportunities as well, be it for to try to bring possibly council back into in-person meetings time in the future. So we may look at getting some enhanced audiovisual kind of equipment, some better presentation equipment for council. And we're also looking at a request from the BIA for some work done to planters to kind of repaint them and do that. So we've gotten some quotes for that. So we've got 4 different ones kind of that we're looking at right now to bring forward in later in April or May for that fund. So there are a lot of different ones. The one thing I should update council upon now is we are unlikely to participate in the next modernization grant funding envelope. One of the challenges there is that we had to expend the full amount of funding that we previously received. So council will recall we received somewhere in the ballpark, I believe, of $530,000. We haven't expended that all, so we're going to bring some reports forward to try to expedite our spending and get some more software and modernization done over the next few months in case that funding comes up again this summer. And also when the province comes out later this month and announces their next budget, we're expecting some big funding announcements as they switch from funding people directly for COVID-19 to begin to fund infrastructure. So we're also kind of working with Rob on that to get some big projects before council so that we could have some things shovel ready for this fall, specifically with the water and wastewater infrastructure. That's kind of the funding roundup.
Thank you very much for that, Andy. Are there any other inquiries by members? Okay, we'll move on to statements and committee reports. Councillor Oslach?
Yeah, yes, Your Worship. The same grant, the Catfish Creek Conservation Authority has applied for the grant, and we're getting a new playground. And further to that, our Maple Syrup Festival has been canceled.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Oslach. Are there any other statements and committee reports? Okay, report of the mayor. I don't have anything to report this evening. Notice of motion. Okay, and next resolution is for meeting closed to the public.
That council moves into a meeting closed to the public at 7:49 p.m. for the purpose of considering personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal local board employees relating to the Director of Emergency Services Fire Chief CEMC recruitment, and further personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal local board employees relating to the Public Works Operator recruitment.
Okay, someone to move and someone to second. Councillor Chapman and Councillor Charlton, are there any questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. And we'll just take a couple moments to move into closed session.